Okay, welcome back to the deep dive. So you've given us this really interesting collection of materials, notes, articles, bits from the book itself, all focused on the Hebrew secret.
That's right.
And it sounds like you're hoping we can unpack it a bit, figure out the core story, who the key players are, and maybe why it clicks, especially for readers who, enjoy that deep character stuff in historical settings, high-stakes historical fiction.
Exactly. These sources give us a great window into it, not just the plot, but really the feel of the world, the characters' internal lives. It's less a summary, more like stepping inside for a look around.
Got it. So our mission today. Let's dive into this material. We'll pull out the key characters, trace the main story arc without spoiling the big reveals, of course, explore the themes that seem really potent, and help you decide if this is one for your reading list.
Sounds good. Let's jump in. The story seems to start really focusing on this young man, Joseph. And he's got these dreams, right? Vivid, symbolic dreams.
Yeah, and those dreams immediately cause problems. Big problems. The sources show his brothers seeing them as, Joseph thinking he'll rule over them.
Mm-hmm. Adds fuel to the fire.
Right, because there's already resentment there. And Jacob, his father, clearly plays favorites. That coat is mentioned, the famous coat. It just makes everything worse. The whole family dynamic feels pretty tense from the get-go.
Absolutely. The material suggests this isn't new tension, it's just simmering. And then it boils over dramatically.
Which leads to that major turning point. The brothers betray him. They actually sell him into slavery.
Yeah, a huge betrayal. And that's what sends him on this journey to ancient Egypt. His whole world just flips upside down.
And the sources then place us primarily in this new setting, Egypt, specifically the household of Potifar. He's the captain of Pharaoh's guard, right? Described as very ordered, very complex.
Very structured, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a stark contrast to his upbringing. Almost overwhelming at first, you get the sense.
Okay, so within this Egyptian world, who are the really key people we meet through these sources? Started with Joseph himself, obviously, in this new reality.
Well, Joseph's journey is pretty central. He goes from this favored son to suddenly a slave. But even then, the material highlights this inherent capability. He's first bought by a trader, Amenemheb, who apparently sees some potential in him.
Okay.
Then he lands in Potiphar's house, and he doesn't just, cope. He starts to rise. The descriptions paint him as smart, steady, someone with a mind that listens. He's literate, apparently in multiple languages, good with numbers, records, even understands trade routes.
So real practical skills, but also something more, that resilience, that integrity the sources keep mentioning. It seems like that gets tested constantly.
Constantly. And that integrity, his refusal to compromise, especially later on, becomes a major source of tension in the plot. It really drives things.
And his master, Potiphar, seems pretty important to his initial success there.
Definitely. Potiphar's presented as powerful, efficient, a military guy who values order. And he notices Joseph. He sees these unusual skills, this wisdom. The sources detail how Potiphar starts trusting him more and more, giving him huge responsibilities.
Like managing the household.
Yeah, efficiency goes way up. Potiphar apparently notes Joseph's depth, a wisdom unusual for someone of your age and background. There's a growing respect there.
Okay, but then there's Potiphar's wife, Kimet. She introduces a complication.
Oh, absolutely. A dangerous one.
Yeah.
The tension between her and Joseph, you can feel it in the descriptions. The sources show her making advances, becoming more aggressive over time.
And Joseph refuses.
Steadfastly.
Yeah.
Based on loyalty to Potiphar and also his own faith. But this puts him in incredible danger. The notes mentioned her charm can hide a vicious temper and a real sense of entitlement. Not someone you want to cross.
No. And then there's Asenath. She seems to come from a different angle altogether.
Completely different. She's the daughter of Potifar, who's a high-ranking priest. Their first encounter is apparently quite striking. She sees him in the marketplace, in chains, but senses something more, something different about him.
So it's not just a political or household dynamic, it's something else.
Exactly. Her story is really about this deep spiritual questioning. She starts challenging the traditional Egyptian religion she grew up in and becomes fascinated by Joseph's faith, the God he talks about.
And they form a connection.
A really deep one, according to the sources. Emotional, spiritual, it develops despite all the barriers. He's a slave, she's highborn, which makes it incredibly powerful, but also, really risky for both of them.
Right. And Amenemheb, the trader who first bought Joseph, he comes back into the picture.
He does, yeah. Later on, he emerges as this politically ambitious figure. And he sees Joseph, who by then has gained some standing, as a threat.
A threat how?
Not just personally, but symbolically. Joseph represents foreign influence, and Amenemheb uses that. The sources show him kind of building his power by stirring up fear and prejudice against foreigners, framing it as needing to counter the Hebrew threat. It's a political strategy.
Interesting. Okay, the story also takes us into prison based on these notes. Who does Joseph meet there? What does that part of the story show us?
Even in prison, his character shines through, apparently. We meet Num, the chief jailer. Initially wary, but he comes to trust and respect Joseph. Calls him a model prisoner. Says he's different. Joseph is shown caring for the sick, settling disputes.
So he finds ways to lead even there.
Exactly. And other prisoners like Kenti and Senenmut are mentioned as finding hope through his counsel. It suggests he had this ability to connect and uplift even in the bleakest place.
And isn't this where the dreams come back in?
Yes, significantly. He interprets dreams for two fellow prisoners, the cupbearer and the baker, who used to work in Pharaoh's palace. This directly connects back to his own early dreams. It strongly hints, that there's a larger purpose unfolding, even behind bars.
And Asenath's father, the priest Potifar, what's his role?
He's a fascinating figure, deeply rooted in Egyptian tradition, naturally concerned when his daughter starts exploring this other faith. But the material suggests he evolves. He shows this surprising understanding, even pride in her spiritual journey, despite how unconventional it is. It's a complex relationship.
Okay, so let's trace the plot a bit more, based on what these excerpts consistently show. We don't want to spoil endings, but just get the shape of it. Joseph's rise in Potiphar's house is pretty quick.
Yeah, surprisingly fast. It really highlights his competence and that integrity we talked about. He earns trust rapidly, handles sensitive stuff, deals with important visitors. The sources give examples, managing events, overseeing trade discussions, even giving advice on administration that impresses people.
But always with the shadow of Kimet hanging over him.
Always. That tension just keeps building. Her attempts to seduce him, his consistent refusal of the material, really emphasizes the immense risk he's taking with each refusal. It's a defining test for him.
And alongside this, that connection with Asenath is growing deeper.
He really is. It moves from that first glance to secret conversations about faith, about purpose. The sources describe this powerful bond forming, moments of real connection, like a kiss mentioned in a grove somewhere.
Wow. Despite the danger.
Despite the huge danger and the social chasm between them, which makes their eventual forced separation when it comes feel really significant.
And all this time, Amenemheb is making his moves in the background.
Yeah, he's playing the long game, building influence subtly at first by tapping into those fears about foreigners. And he specifically targets Joseph as a symbol to rally people against, boosting his own political climb.
Which then sets the stage for the accusation.
Exactly. The sources lead up to Kamwaset, feeling rejected and maybe cornered, falsely accusing Joseph, and that's what lands him in prison.
Potifar has to act, obviously.
He does. But the text suggests that later, Potifar figures out Kamwaset lied. It highlights his difficult position caught between public duty and perhaps private knowledge.
And Joseph in prison, he doesn't just crumble.
No, quite the opposite. Prison becomes another place where his character is tested and shown. He maintains his integrity, becomes a leader among the inmates in his own quiet way, works to make things better, earns the jailer Num's respect, gets certain privileges even.
And that's when he interprets the dreams for the cupbearer and baker.
Right, a crucial moment. It links everything back to the start of his story, suggesting that even in this lowest point, that divine purpose is still at work. It feels like a moment setting up something more. Anticipation.
What about Asenath during this time? How does she react?
She's deeply affected. The sources describe her trying desperately to maintain contact with him, visiting the prison under guise of religious duties, using coded language. It shows her resolve.
And her own journey continues.
Yes, this period seems to accelerate her spiritual transformation. She questions her old faith even more, embraces Joseph's God more fully, even though she faces pressure from the temple authorities. Warnings are mentioned.
And what becomes of Potifar and Kamwaset's relationship after this?
The material indicates Potifar eventually confronts her. Her deception comes out, and their marriage essentially collapses. Her actions have these devastating ripple effects, not just for Joseph.
Meanwhile, Amenemheb's political maneuvering pays off.
It seems so, at least up to the point these excerpts cover. He successfully builds his power base on that platform of fear and xenophobia. So the forces opposing Joseph and people like him are definitely solidified and in positions of influence.
So where these sources seem to consistently leave us is Joseph is still in prison, but he's respected there, his integrity intact, waiting. Asenath is forging her own path of faith, holding on to hope. And Amenemheb is ascendant, representing the political opposition. It's a moment of real tension, not a resolution.
That definitely feels like the common thread across these different pieces,
Right.
focusing on that complex state of affairs, the ongoing struggles and character arcs up to that point.
Okay, so that naturally leads us to think about the major themes these sources highlight in the book. Faith, divine purpose, that seems huge.
Absolutely central. You see this contrast, the maybe more formal ritualistic Egyptian worship that Asenath finds lacking versus Joseph's very personal active faith in one God. And both of them, through their suffering and their connection, seem to find purpose and strength in that faith. It's explored deeply.
And suffering itself leading to transformation, especially for Joseph.
Right. It's not just hardship for hardship's sake. It's presented as this crucible that forges character. You see Joseph grow immensely from that favorite kid to the slave, the prisoner. And Asenath's questioning her own struggles, they deepen her understanding, her compassion.
Integrity versus compromise is another big one, isn't it?
Definitely. Joseph's refusal of Kamwaset is the prime example, making that incredibly risky choice based on principle. The narrative seems to explore the cost, but also the value of holding on to who you are when the pressure's on.
And just human nature in general seems really on display.
You get the whole spectrum, don't you? Loyalty may be Potiphar's eventual understanding, but also brutal betrayal from the brothers, from Kamwaset. You see fear, ambition in Amenemheb, and then the dignity and despair you find among the prisoners. It's all there.
That bond between Joseph and Asenath touches on love and sacrifice, too.
Yeah, their connection is portrayed as powerful, but so dangerous. The sources emphasize the risks they take, the sacrifices involved just to maintain that bond and stay true to themselves in a world trying to force them apart.
And underlying it all, there's this constant hum of political intrigue and power.
For sure. From the family squabbles right at the start, through the hierarchy in Potiphar's house, to the big stage where Amenemheb manipulates fear for political gain. It shows how individual lives get caught up in these bigger currents.
Okay, so thinking about all that, the setting, the characters, the themes, why should someone who specifically loves historical fiction pick this book up, based on what we've seen?
Well, first, if you love being immersed in an ancient world, the descriptions we get glimpses of here, Potiphar's estate, the markets, the temples, even the prison, they sound incredibly rich and detailed. It seems like it really brings ancient Egypt to life.
And if you're drawn to character-driven stories.
Oh, this sounds like it's right up your alley. These sources put huge emphasis on the internal journeys of Joseph and Asenath, their struggles, their growth under pressure. And even the antagonists like Kamwaset and Amenemheb seem complex, not just cardboard cutouts. Lots of moral gray areas, maybe.
What about readers who like high stakes and suspense in their historical reads?
Plenty of that, it seems. You've got the palace intrigue, the danger around Kamwaset, the injustice of the imprisonment, Amenemheb's plotting. It creates real suspense. One source even called parts of it a gripping thriller.
And for those interested in how faith and spirituality are explored in fiction,
that seems like a really significant part of the narrative. Asenath's journey, especially moving from her traditional background to this new personal faith, sounds like a major, compelling storyline. And Joseph's own faith under trial is obviously powerful too.
So it sounds like it takes a story many people know the basics of, but really fleshes it out, adds new dimensions.
Exactly. It deepens the motivations, brings in these crucial new perspectives like Asenath's and Amenemheb's, and just offers a much richer, more nuanced look at these familiar events. A fresh take.
Okay, so if all this sounds intriguing and you want to check out The Hebrew Secret for yourself, where should you go? How can you find it or connect with the author?
Well, the material does give some pointers for staying connected with the author, Miren Cyrus, especially for news about this series or other releases.
Right. It specifically mentions signing up for the author's newsletter as a good way to get updates. So the link we have here is subscribepage.io, FIAEZO.
Yeah, and the notes say signing up there gets you things like exclusive previews, maybe some behind-the-scenes stuff about the writing or the history, special offers, giveaways, news on release dates, that kind of thing.
Sounds useful. And there's also an Instagram handle mentioned, Instagram.com/Silver Gravity Entertainment.
Right. Following there would likely give you more visual glimpses, updates, keep you in the loop on the author's work and the world of the book.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive, pulling together all these threads from the sources you shared about The Hebrew Secret. We've walked through the setup, met these really compelling characters in Joseph's Egyptian world, followed the plot twists and turns up to that point of high tension, and explored some seriously powerful themes.
It definitely paints a picture of a story that aims to immerse you in this ancient setting while grappling with timeless questions, faith, integrity, suffering, connection, all through the eyes of some very memorable characters.
Absolutely. So if that journey sounds like one you want to take, you now know where you can find the book and connect further. And maybe as we finish up today, here's a thought to carry with you, something that echoes from this story. Isn't it interesting how often the sources suggest profound transformation, the deepest faith, isn't found in comfort or power, but emerges from the most challenging, the most forgotten places, even a prison cell? What might that suggest about where we should look for strength and meaning in our own lives, perhaps in unexpected circumstances?
That's a powerful thought to end on. Thanks for digging into this with me.
Our pleasure. Until the next deep dive.